Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our conversation starter, which is Speak Out About Mental Health. I am very excited for this conversation tonight to really prepare you all to have some of these conversations with maybe yourself, with the youth in your life, and also just anybody else that you really care about within your life or your community. Tonight, we are being joined by Debbie, and Debbie is the Deputy Director at the National Mental Health Innovation Center as part of the University of Colorado's Anschutz Medical Campus. And we are recording this conversation tonight because we have a lot of people that are interested in hearing the conversation, but they weren't able to attend live. So thank you all again for coming tonight, and we're excited to have this conversation. Debbie's going to start in just a minute, and while she is presenting, if you do have any questions that you want to ask or clarifying things, you can go ahead and type them in the chat. The chat is just coming to me as the host, and so it won't be distracting to her or anything like that. And when we do take some pauses for questions or to kind of dive deeper, please just go ahead and type them in there, and I'll share them when we get ready. Okay. All right, Debbie, are you ready to take it away? I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see her nice and big. All right, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. I will go ahead and share my screen and make sure we're on the right slide. And then, I definitely want this to be more of a conversation, which is always a little trickier to do when we are using Zoom, but please feel free to chat, Emily, about different questions that come up as I go through the slides. But I wanted to just start by giving you all an overview of the National Mental Health Innovation Center and really our mission here at the center. And so it's really about bringing mental health and technology together, as this title slide says. A little bit about me. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training. A lot of my research and background has been focused on child development and child well-being, specifically around resiliency and kind of the positive side to things. Like a lot of times we tend to focus on what's going wrong. And so for me, it's really about what are the things that we're doing right too. And so let me see here. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my background to give you a little bit of context, but I did my work, my graduate work at CU Boulder. I have a background in cognitive behavioral therapy along with mindfulness-based therapies, and ended up working in San Diego for my internship at the Rady Children's Hospital, so in the inpatient psychiatric unit for youth, and also was doing couples therapy at the VA during that time. Beyond internship, postdoc arrived, and I ended up working in technology, specifically digital health and genomics. My research background is in twin research, and so this sounds a little more winding path than it actually is, but I studied how we could decipher what's genetic versus environmental kind of factors in development. In particular, I was looking at externalizing behaviors. So ADHD, conduct disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder, but also some internalizing behaviors too. And so tonight I'm going to speak to you a bit about what our center is doing and then answer some questions. Emily already primed me with a few to get us started. And so the National Mental Health Innovation Center was really started because our executive director, Matt Vogel, was frustrated with the state of mental health. He was the director at the Depression Center on the Anschutz Medical Campus. So we're also located on Anschutz Medical Campus in Aurora. And he was frustrated with the long waiting lists. He also talks about his own personal story around seeking mental health and working in mental health and all the struggles that even when you know how to navigate the system, how difficult it can be. And I think this can be especially true when we're talking about kiddos and parents and trying to find the right resources for your child. And so he started the center really out of frustration, wanting to bring new innovative ideas to mental health, to how we approach mental health. And when I refer to mental health, I'm thinking of like the full spectrum of it, like prevention, treatment, but also recovery, like those times after we're finally feeling better, how do we build our own kind of recovery plan and resiliency so that we can maintain our well-being. And so it really covers the span. I would say our center focuses a lot on prevention. And so I'll be talking to you a little bit about some projects that we're working on. I'm happy to share my contact information too. So if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out, because I'm just going to be at kind of the 10,000 foot view around our work. But through this process over the past 3 years, we realized that technology was a mechanism for us to be able to scale mental health resources. And now we're all used to using technology. A couple of years ago, we weren't. And so part of our role was really going into the community and understanding how and if people are using technology, what works for them, what doesn't. We would go into community mental health centers or different organizations and really understand what their barriers were, what their needs were, really do a needs assessment. And through that process, talk to them about tech and what different types of technology they could leverage. Our team started working with several experts in virtual reality. And so that's an area that we've focused on quite a bit. But we also work in mobile apps and also different devices. So widgets and gadgets that you wear to track different kind of measurements, whether that be EEG on your brain around kind of brain activity, or if it's different devices you wear on your wrist for heart rate and those types of things. And so through that process, we've been really looking at how technology can be leveraged for mental health and well-being. And we've developed this community that we refer to as the Tech Innovation Network. And so through that process, we have created relationships with the Girl Scouts of Colorado, among other groups such as community mental health centers. I've already mentioned some of the different specialty clinics on campus, but then even beyond kind of where you would think of specific mental health treatment, we are working with K through 12 schools, first responders, different companies. Really, mental health touches everything. And so we're focused not on specific locations or specific kind of specialties, but rather generally how can mental health and technology fit. And so we started a lot around virtual reality. And so when we started working with community partners, we would bring in headsets and we'd loan them headsets to use. We focused on relaxation and kind of mindfulness meditation, leveraging VR for that. A lot of times people struggle with those skills. They're really useful skills to have, and they're really difficult to learn. A lot of times when someone, if you've tried meditation, you sit down, they say, close your eyes, and your mind just goes all over the place. And so it can be really frustrating. And so we found that VR is kind of training wheels for different relaxation meditation skills. And so that's something that we focused on along with other areas of focus. And so let me just walk you through kind of a couple different projects, if I can get my slides to advance here. So one thing I wanted to just mention right away is our Jeremy Richmond Brain Health Research Fellowship and Internship. And the reason I wanted to mention this evening is because we are actively recruiting high school teens right now to participate in this internship. We have an application, I put the link here for teens. So if you yourself has a teen at home or you know of teens that would be interested in this, and really the opportunity stems from our new initiative called the Aviel Initiative. This was an initiative that was started. We're humbled and honored to take on this role when the Aviel Foundation, which was originally started in memory of Aviel Richmond, who died in the Sandy Hook shootings. And then her father started the Aviel Foundation, and he took his life approximately 2 years ago. And his wife and the rest of their board decided to find a new home for it. And so we're honored to carry on Aviel's name and Jeremy's name. And so we are just kicking this off this summer, but it's an internship really focused on nurturing young minds. We want to help bring research kind of to the forefront. A lot of Jeremy's work was focused on brain health and the prevention of violence, and also the building compassion, and really about how do we look at violence more from a scientific standpoint rather than just these acts of violence that happen and occur, such as the Sandy Hook shooting. And so we're currently recruiting. So again, if you know anyone, and I'll talk a little bit about the project that they'll be working on. And so something that we've been really interested in, especially since COVID started, was around technology use in teens. In terms of kind of how technology is used, we know that there's a lot of data out there about imbalance around technology use, and being able to maintain balance can be really challenging. And so our team really wanted to focus on how do we maintain balance. And so that actually included some of our partners at Girl Scouts of Colorado being able to talk to different stakeholders to understand what are the needs for teens right now. And so we know teens are susceptible to mental health struggles, especially during the pandemic. All of us are impacted by this. And I think teens especially, like what we've been seeing around, there's a lot of identity built around social networks and being around people, developing friendships, especially in those development years. And so this is a critical time to be able to continue to connect with others, maintain that balance, but also have that sense of identity as you leave, or as you reintegrate back into school. Because we know this isn't a light switch. It's not an on-off light switch. It's a dimmer switch. We're not just going to go back to normal. And so how do we approach these things to be able to help support our youth as they transition back to kind of quote unquote normal life? And so something that we know is that some teens did really well when it came to working remote. And a lot of times those were teenagers who maybe had a lot of social anxiety. And so being around classmates was really difficult for them. And so for them, going back might be really challenging. And then you have the other teens who were, social butterflies, loved interacting with people on a day-to-day basis, who you may see withdrawing and having more kind of depressive symptoms because they don't have those day-to-day connections. And so for everyone, that's going to be a little different, and I'll caveat all my answers tonight around this because I think it really just depends on the individual and kind of what they're experiencing right now. But for us, it was important to understand the impact of technology on adolescent well-being, and specifically around how do we build resilience and how do we build compassion and connection through technology, because that is the means we have right now in a lot of ways. And so we started the Teens in Technology Project, and this was funded through the Mayor Foundation and then also through the AVL initiative that I just mentioned. And so we wanted to understand how they're coping with changes and disruptions due to COVID-19, but also understand how they're using technology to connect with others. Like, how are they using technology in a way that's actually healthy or that feels fulfilling to them, where they set down their phone or their device and they walk away and they feel better. That's really our focus. And so we interviewed some subject matter experts, including some of the folks at Colorado at Girl Scouts, who helped provide us guidance around this. And so this summer, we're going to be interviewing approximately 50 adolescents to ask them about this process and what this has looked like for them. These are the organizations that we spoke with around kind of what's the current state and how are teens feeling. And we transcribed that information in a program called In Vivo, and it was coded by several of our research assistants here at the center. And so there were kind of several different themes that came up. So kind of two different themes. This is more specific to the research we're doing around how we approach talking to teens about their experiences during the past year, but also the structure of the interview. But pertinent to tonight, the kind of 5 themes that came up around the content that's important for us to talk about is the role of compassion, resiliency, and coping, mental health challenges at this time, the negative role of tech, and the positive role of tech. And specifically around compassion, a lot of the feedback we're receiving was talking about how adolescents feel the need to support others despite their personal struggles. So even though youth might be struggling at this time, they also want to still reach out and they still want to support others. And that adolescents feel the most supported when they're heard and empowered by adults in their lives. And I think that specific theme will tie back to some of the questions that I was sent ahead of time. And so, in terms of how are adolescents connecting with others during the pandemic, how are they helping support others in their circle, in their community? How are they using technology in these efforts? And these can be really small things. It might be a phone call to grandma. It might be a text to a friend you haven't spoken to. It might be dropping something off at someone's doorstep who is in, quarantined or something like that. And so these are kind of the different things that we're going to be asking teens this summer when we speak to them. And here are just a few quotes from the subject matter experts. They may not be able to articulate how they're feeling or why they're feeling like that, but they can recognize that they need to reach out to their peers and families. And so I think sometimes teens will want to reach out and they might stumble a bit. They might not know how to reach out. And so these are the times where just giving them a space to talk about that is really important. And there's a group mentality of people are really struggling here. What can we do to help them right now? Not in a clinical sense, but what can we do to help people before they get to crisis or have to ask for help? And so I think this is really that place where we can be more proactive, because we know changes are going to be coming as the vaccine rolls out, especially for if it's on track, as we're hearing in the news, that teens and younger youth will be able to have it or be able to access it soon. And if that's the case, we have an opportunity here to start talking about this transition ahead of time and not waiting till the day before they're suddenly going to be, back in a school setting or something along those lines. And then support from adults. So in this case, it was a student or a teacher that we spoke to, but our students have a better sense of belonging in their schools when they have strong partnerships with decision makers on campus. They feel there is a mechanism there for their voice to be heard. They have some way to express themselves and say what they need to say. So again, this space to express themselves. Sometimes the emotions that they express are going to be messy, and sometimes they might be difficult to deal with as either a caregiver or as a teacher or as a mentor. But they're going to be really important emotions to just give them space to have. And as they talk about it, it's like, I need space to make mistakes and try things. And also I know a lot right now, and I know it's a lot right now, and I need that to be honored and recognized in the way that you are treating me, in the way that I am seen. So again, this theme of really being able to give them space, helping them to be heard. And I know as I say this, it's easier said than done. So we'll talk through kind of a few tips to that in a moment. And so really, this is our goal, is to look at adolescents' mental health and the role of technology in response to COVID-19. We're planning to, from this, write various guidelines that would be both for the youth and for the adults in the youth's life to look at in terms of different ways that they might leverage their technology to connect with others or to build that sense of resiliency. And there are a lot of programs that, especially now in the past year, the funding and kind of venture capital funding around mental health technology is just growing significantly. And that includes tech and resources for younger children, along with teens and preteens. And so if you know of any teens who'd be interested in participating and talking to us about their technology use, I've put one of our program managers' contact information, Dr. Chloe Nixick-Sigmund. She will be recruiting teens for the research this summer. Based on kind of how everything's going, we'll be doing these interviews via Zoom, and then your teen can get a gift card afterwards for telling us about their experience with technology. And then I want to just talk to you about one other project that we work with, or a company specifically that we work with. So our organization works directly with technology companies who are in early stage startups around mental health tech. And so our team can provide different guidance around consultation of clinical content, or it might be research, or how do you set up and design a pilot. And so our role really varies depending on the company. And so in this case, this company is called Limbics, and they've developed what's called a digital therapeutic. So this is a type of app that would be prescribed by a primary care doctor, by a psychiatrist for adolescent mental health. And currently, the app is available with parental permission as part of a research study. There were some guidelines that were changed because of COVID, that different technology was made accessible to different folks. So if you have any interest in this, you can go to Limbics, to their website. I believe it's just limbics.com, and click on the research tab or participate in research tab, and that will tell you a little bit more. But this app was really developed for teens who are experiencing mild to moderate symptoms of depression. And the content itself is based on cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically behavioral activation. And behavioral activation is an approach where really it's about understanding the different activities in your life that help you feel maybe better versus the activities that might make you feel worse. So maybe, for us adults, it might be doom scrolling if you're reading news. For adolescents, it might be looking at social media. Some may look at social media and feel better and energized after, whereas others might feel lonely or isolated after. And so for each kid, it's going to be different in terms of identifying the activities that are more up activities versus the activities that are down activities for them. And so our team's been working with Limbics to develop the content for this program. The little robot down here is called Limbot. You can personalize that, and it's I believe, 5-week program that teens do at their own pace. But really the goal is about being able to get tools into the hands of teens that can help them manage different symptoms before it gets so severe that they need one-on-one therapy, or to the where it's more severe depression that they experience. And so this is really a new approach in terms of mental health. I think a lot of us are, this transition in the past year has helped open the door around teletherapy. And so this is just another tool that's self-guided and being able to go through kind of different activities. And so what you do is you schedule different activities during the week. And really the idea is that even when you're feeling lousy, like you want to stay in bed or you don't want to go outside, that even just going outside to walk around the block for 5 minutes usually will help your mood improve a little. If not, it'll stay the same, but it won't get worse. And so that's really the goal of behavioral activation, being able to engage in activities, even if your emotions are telling you, I don't want to right now. So why don't I transition to the questions that I received? So some of the questions that came up were, how do we go about bringing up to a parent when one of our girls exhibits signs that they're struggling and in need of help? And I think this is a really important question because kids exhibit different behaviors around different people and with different people. And I think in terms of if there's a behavior that seems really significant in terms of safety risk, that's one thing. Like the parents need to be notified right away, or the guardian needs to be notified right away. But I think if someone's exhibiting behaviors around like sadness or anxiety, maybe even just asking the teen, I think a lot of times trying to empower teenagers, I mean, I work a lot with adults too, and empower adults to kind of communicate what their emotions are. So being able to say like, hey, I've noticed this. Have you talked to anyone else about it? Or have you talked to your parents about it, or your mom or your sister or whoever it is? And so I think sometimes encouraging and seeing if the teen wants to expand kind of their support network around that on their own. And then I think when bringing things up with parents, if the teen's like, no, I don't want to, maybe bringing things up with either asking the teen, like, would it be okay if I talk to your mom about this? And if they really don't want to, maybe just asking the parent generally, like, how have you been doing? Like, things have been difficult. We're just checking in with parents so that maybe they don't feel singled out either. But just asking more about like, have you noticed anything? We're kind of noticing this here. In my years of working with kids, a lot of times we'll do assessments, have questionnaires filled out. And in the case of school age kids, I would have parents fill out the forms. I'd have teachers fill out the forms because, again, kids exhibit different behaviors in different environments. And so I think now it seems like we're exhibiting all the same behaviors in the same environment, but I might be different in my office versus when I'm in the rest of the house around my family. And so I think just being able to open a dialogue, or at least bringing some awareness to it so a parent can check in if they want. But ideally, especially depending on the age of the child, it would be great if they can bring it up to someone else, to their parent or to a sibling to talk about, and how to bring that up. So maybe that's an opportunity to talk to them about how they want to talk about it and role play some. And then the other question was, how can we help our teens and preteens with emotional problems as they become mean, lash out, and become angry, and they won't talk about what's going on? So this can be really tricky because anger is one of those things where it's meant to be protective. So when we get angry, what we're saying is we're telling everyone around us to back off, stay away from me. And what's really hard as a parent, as a caregiver, as someone, you love and care about this person, they're upset. And so a lot of times what we'll do is try to fix it in the moment. Like, okay, well, let's talk about this. What's going on? Or we might get sucked into a power struggle, like stop behaving that way. And again, this is all on a spectrum. So if they're like hitting someone or doing something violent, that's different than kind of like yelling and screaming. And so if they're doing something violent, you want to, try to stop that as quick as possible and mitigate it as quick as possible. But in terms of if they're screaming at you, like a lot of times what happens when someone screams at you, it pulls for you to want to either yell back or tell them to stop, or tell them they're being mean, whatever it is. And a lot of times, we're well-oiled machines in a lot of ways. And so your children also know how to push your buttons. And so they're going to say the things that are going to upset you. And so I think first step is just recognizing when that happens, that am I getting pulled into a power struggle? Like, do I feel that pit in my stomach right now? And in those cases, it's probably best if it's, again, safe to just walk away for a few minutes. Like trying to talk to someone when they're really angry can be really difficult. Now, and then being able to come back to them when they're calm and just asking open-ended questions, saying like, what was going on earlier? Like, I noticed you were upset. Like, can you tell me a bit about that? Now, whether or not they open up about that is hard. I think one other thing we do with kind of the harder emotions, again, the way I think of this is like anger, frustration are kind of these hard emotions that are on the top layer, and underneath those are like the anxiety, the sadness, the fear. And so a lot of times if we're feeling sad, maybe we felt left out, what will happen is you'll show, so you're feeling sad, you're sitting at home, you're on your phone, you realize your friends are hanging out or something happened, and your parent comes in and they're like, hey, can you do this? And what you see is anger, because a lot of times what's easier to express is that harder emotion. But what's underneath these hard emotions, a lot of times is there's some kind of like feeling of being wronged or upset. And so a lot of times when we feel anger or frustration, people around us will try to fix it. Like, well, did you try this? How about talking to this person? Did you call them? Did you ask them if they're really upset about this? And what that does is we're trying to help. Like, we genuinely want them to feel better. But what that does is it says there's no space for this emotion right now. And what we need to do is be able to validate and empathize with, I get it, like you're upset. I can tell you're really angry right now, and that's okay. Like, I think a lot of times negative emotions are really uncomfortable for us to sit with. And at the same time, being able to do that and show your child that it's okay, or, a student, that it's okay to be angry, again, within limits. Like if they're really being mean and acting out, that's not tolerated, in those cases. You should not try to validate their emotion, because at that point they're being pretty mean. And so just being able to say something about anger's normal. I feel angry sometimes. Recognizing that during this time, especially, people have shorter fuses. There's a lot more going on. There's a lot more stress in the world. So that's one way to kind of talk about it. Now, depending on where a child is developmentally, it can vary. So some kids, if you ask them outright, like, how are you feeling or what's going on, they might not be able to talk to you about it in that context. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because at the beginning of COVID, our team has done a lot with the movie Inside Out, Pixar's movie Inside Out. And we put together a viewing guide where parents could sit down with their child and watch the movie together. Now, keeping in mind, I know teenagers may or may not want to sit down for this movie, but we put together a viewing guide where you could pause the movie and ask questions about the different emotions in the movie. Like, what did you notice with anger there? Or what do you think, sadness is, why do you think sadness is sad? And we also tied it back to questions around COVID in terms of like, do you ever feel sad when you have to stay home because of COVID? And so using tools like that, where the focus isn't just you focusing on your child, looking at them saying, how are you feeling? Where they might not either have the kind of emotional intelligence and ability to kind of verbally communicate that, or they might not know how they're feeling. A lot of times we don't know how we're feeling. And so being able to use an activity, whether that be sit down and drawing with your child or coloring with your child, watching a movie with them, and maybe just asking one question like, how did you feel about, X, Y, and Z during that movie? Or did you notice that person got really angry when X happened? And being able to leverage different tools, and maybe it's activities too, where you're out biking and you want to just chat about different things. And so I think those are kind of different ways that that you can kind of engage your child or the child you're working with around their emotions. Again, anger can be a really scary emotion because it really does push you away. And at the same time, it's okay for us to get angry and frustrated at times. And now if it's over the top, like, again, that's something that maybe looking for additional resources to help manage whatever's kind of going on underneath. It may also be encouraging them to talk to someone that that they'll open up to. Everyone's different in terms of who they want to talk to. And I think also as parents, it's really hard to notice all the things. Like, you're busy and trying to manage everything going on in the world, especially right now, and all the changes that are happening for us. And so being able to have some self-compassion is really important right now, and being able to recognize that it's okay to like mess it up every so often, and we're not perfect, we're humans. And so being able to give yourself that self-compassion is going to help you approach your child in a different space than if you're just angry at them or frustrated, because it can be really frustrating, especially when they don't listen to you. So, and then in terms of kind of the underlying emotions, I think it really is about trying to help them identify or even modeling like, oh, that makes me sad when this happens. And showing them a few skills around that can be very helpful. Okay, so additional questions here. What are some prompt questions or activities to start talking about how they are doing? Are you okay? Doesn't always get a response. Yep. Good question. So are you okay? Yeah. Yes or no. So I would say I often, and this comes from working with a lot of kids who had disruptive behaviors. So a lot of times if I would ask them a closed-ended question, like, can you pick up your toys? They would say no, and then sometimes throw the toys at me. And so I've learned to ask open-ended questions, like, or not making it a yes or no response. So how about we pick up your toys, or let's pick up your toys, making it more of a statement. So you may say something like, tell me about how you're doing, or tell me how you're feeling today. And then if they can't answer that, maybe saying on a scale of 1 to 10, are you feeling lousy? 10, are you feeling great? Can you give me a number? And that's kind of a way to give them some anchors, or it might be, do you feel, it really depends on the situation. So I think in the case of prompting them, it's more about checking in with them also when they're in the right space. So if they're trying to rush to something, or you're trying to rush to something, so being able to say to them either, at a downtime during the day, and just saying, hey, I just want to check in and see how you're doing. Tell me what's been going on. So some kind of statement where they can at least tell you like, well, I've been working on this, or I'm doing this. And then if they say nothing, you can say, okay, that's all right. Well, let me know if you want to talk about anything. Like, it's okay for them to just say, I'm fine, or nothing's wrong, or it's okay. That's okay too. And I think being able to just open that dialogue is a starting place. And so just checking in with them. And I think especially now, like, you can use different talking points around transitions. Like, hey, now that we're vaccinated, or whoever's getting vaccinated, or now that you're going to be going back to school, if that happens in the fall, like, let's talk about this. Like, that could be, are you excited? Are you scared? Like, and just again, normalizing, like, I feel scared about going back to work, or I feel excited about going back to work, but I also feel scared. I think that's the other part, is just recognizing they can hold a bunch of different emotions at once. But really being able to open-ended questions around, tell me about your day, tell me how you're doing. What is something that you're looking forward to? What is something that's been difficult this week? Like, just trying to get them to respond with more content than just yes, no, or maybe. or I don't know. I don't know is my favorite in working with teens. And so a lot of times they would say, I'd ask them a question and be like, I don't know. And so my approach to that is just to say, that's okay. Just take a minute and think about it. I'll just wait. And so you can try that too. If they say, I don't know, just let them know like, hey, I'm still hanging here and I'm going to wait till you give me something if you really want to try it that way. Again, it comes down to the teen because some teens may or may not respond well to that. And the other question, how do I know if technology is having a negative response? Warning signs, how to talk about it without seeming like we're taking it away. Yeah, so that's a really tricky balance, especially now because we all do rely a lot on technology. I think, again, it goes back to if you start noticing your child withdrawing and just sitting on their phone the whole time or sitting on their iPad or their computer, and see them kind of disengaging from the world around them. Like, I think it's different when you're actively contributing or doing things on your technology, or you're playing video games and you connect with your friend via the video game, like where you're actually socializing. Like, I think a lot of us don't think of tech this way, but can be a social medium. And so I think it's about paying attention to, do you notice that they're on the tech a lot? Like, are they avoiding things a lot? Like, they're not doing their other stuff because of the technology? Are they not responding to different questions? I think being able to just recognize the tech as another outlet for avoidance. And when folks are using technology for avoidance, it's different than when they're using it to connect or be engaged in something. And so thinking of, you got to get this big proposal done, and instead you're scrolling through Twitter. Chances are you're using the technology at that point for avoidance, which in turn is going to make you feel worse because now your proposals, you have to really get this proposal done quickly, and you just spent an hour scrolling through Twitter. And so kids fall into the same traps. They have homework to do, and they're getting, on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, and they're not getting their homework done. And so I think being able to just check in or notice if they're getting more stressed out or more anxious about things, being able to, and again, like this part of not taking away the tech, but just talking to them about balance with technology. Like, hey, I noticed you were just scrolling, what were you looking at or what's going on? Because I know you have this homework to do. And granted, the way I just phrased that might put up defenses, but just asking them, like, even just engaging them in questions about what they're doing on their technology, I think is good. I think there's kind of this secrecy that can happen with tech, and the transparency is really important. Like, what you doing right now? Like, it can be very, they may be in the room with you and you may not even feel like it because they're lost in their cell phone. And so, other ways of dealing with this is engaging them outside the technology. Like, hey, let's do this. Let's go do this. Do you want to help me with X? So trying different things around that and just seeing if you can get them to open up. And again, teens may not realize that scrolling or being on technology actually makes them feel worse. And so even just being able to identify if there are certain triggers or certain things they do on tech where they maybe feel more lousy might be helpful too. Let's see, and thank you, Emily. Yeah, so we have the Inside Out guide on our website, but it's a little hidden. So if you wouldn't mind sending that out, it'd be great. What other questions do you have about teens and tech, and just teens and mental health?
I don't see any other messages coming directly to me, but I'll share one just through Girl Scouts that we get a lot of concern on. And I think you've covered mostly, like how to address this and start these conversations, but really thinking about our leaders and our really mentors. They're sometimes a second family for our Girl Scouts. And do you have any tips of creating a safe space and kind of that eyes of mentor and coach within mental health, that, like, I know you mentioned before, like when to tell, their caregiver or their parent, but really like, how do you create that space? How do you build it into your everyday meeting or conversation or whenever you have touch points with them? I think that's just kind of one last question I have for you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think um, building that space takes time, right? Like developing rapport takes time. But I often think, especially from a mentorship standpoint, is just being consistent and showing up is the first step in that. So the fact that they know you're a stable person in their life will help build that space and that sense of security without having, because I was speaking to another mentor for a different purpose a few weeks ago, and they're trying so hard, and they're trying to engage a teen around kind of colleges and searching for colleges and that whole process. And it's been hard because everything's been remote, and so even just engaging teens on tech can be a little more challenging, and or a lot more challenging. And in that case, we were talking about it, and it's like, ultimately it's up to the teen. Like, we want them to grow and be independent individuals and, feel empowered to make their own decisions and whatnot. And so that's the important part. And so as long as you can listen to someone, and I think that's where showing up, being consistent, that's why kind of the checking in, like just saying like, how was your day? Or tell me something about your day that went well, or tell me about something that maybe went lousy, and I'll tell you about mine. Like, just being able to check in on those things, and also so validating their experience is important too. And even if they don't want to say anything, being able to say like, that's okay, I understand, like you don't have to share right now, but continuing to just ask. And like, if you create that space, a lot of times over time, kids along with adults will start talking more and start opening up more. And I think it also makes it easier if you're able to share a little bit of your own, and I get that there's degrees of that. Like, we don't want parents stressing out their kids about finances or, work or something like that, but being able to just share like, oh, this kind of went lousy this week, and, I'm not feeling the best. And that being okay. We don't need to do anything with that. We don't need to fix it. We don't need to change it. Like, just feeling like that's okay. And so I think, yeah, being able to recognize and especially for mentors, because you're going to see a different side of things. Like, you're not the ones who have to tell them to, brush their teeth and do their homework and go to bed, where parents are often battling a lot of different fronts. And so with mentors, I think you have a space to be able to do that, where you can just be their friend and you can just be a consistent person in their life and be there if they do want to talk. That's the thing about emotions, is a lot of times we think of it as talking. And I know a lot of what I've described today is about talking and opening up discussions, but also just being there and validating it. Like, yeah, I'm sorry you're feeling, lousy today. Making sure that they know it's okay to have those emotions. Like, a lot of times, again, we're kind of trained, especially in society, especially this Instagram society, where everything has to look perfect and put together, and life is messy. And so being able to normalize that is really important, especially right now because of everything that we've been going through over the past year.
Well, this was a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much, Debbie. I have like a page of notes of things, just thinking about how we interact with our Girl Scouts and, youth in our lives. So thank you so much. Before we kind of end for the night, one thing we always ask in every Girl Scout program as we kind of close up is, what's your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
Should I go? Okay. Well, it's Thin Mint, hands down. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And we will send an email out to everybody who's registered for this with some of the resources and the link to the National Mental Health Innovation Center's website that has a lot of this as well. We'll also include Debbie's contact information. And if you're watching the recording of this, we have all those resources below in the description so that you can access those. Thank you again, Debbie, for joining us today.
No, of course. And feel free, also, if folks are interested, we have, we vet a lot of technology. So if you're looking for resources for your teens to try different things to just even learn meditation or mindfulness or managing stress. There's a lot of good stuff out there and there's a lot of not great stuff out there. So our team spends a lot of time on that. So if you have any questions, please reach out and we're happy to give you kind of our 2 cents on it.
I love that. Even more resources. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. And thank you again, Debbie. I hope you all have a good evening and continue this conversation about speaking out about mental health. It's showing up and being there, right? It's the most important thing. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.